So I also don't know everyone here, and that's awesome. Right? I love meeting new people. If I haven't had a chance to come meet you face to face, you stick around a little bit after, I would definitely will thank you. A little bit about myself though. So I did 15 years in a submarine, got out, decided to do my passion with computer science, got my bachelor's, my master's, working on my PhD, all in computer science, focusing on cybersecurity and network security. In the meantime, I've been working my butt off. So I actually put satellites up into space. I did the cybersecurity aspect of that, built ground stations and communication systems. Went and worked for a company called Dark Solutions, which was contracted to build out healthcare applications for the Department of Defense. And then after that, moved over to be the lead developer for high performance computing modernization program. That's a lot of words for saying the Department of Defense supercomputers, all of them. So led the cybersecurity team on that, just developing of their software. And then I went over to DEFCON AI, which was my job that I quit 2 weeks ago to fully focus on this. And so, as Anthony said, this is our first public demonstration. I don't like doing public demonstrations, I'd rather record things, but I know that there's a feel to it. You guys are probably gonna have questions, and so I want to go through everything. That's why we're doing it publicly. If there's a bug, please bear with me. All right. The entire back end has been built out, and it is solid. The back end is what communicates AWS. And if you guys don't know, AWS is Amazon's cloud services, and they are 80% market share, which is why we tackled it first. But the front end is new. The front end is the user experience, the thing that everyone in here will hopefully have some type of comments on and feedback for, because it's the part that matters, right, for the users. And so, if you guys have feedback, please provide it, right? We really do need to. So, we'll get started. This is just a regular web browser. Nobody's logged into it or anything like that.
You want to just bring it back here?
It's running a local large language model, so it's got an AI running on it right now. Everything is done on the machine. Opening up the RapidFactory applications. And the purpose of this is that not everyone has AWS. Not everyone knows about Holocron products. And so it's really expensive. If you're not familiar, you have to have an architect, you have to have a developer, you have to have security analysts, you have to have an entire team to build out infrastructure that's secure. For the Department of Defense, that process can take anywhere from 12 months to 18 months or longer. It's a strenuous process. And so our objective on this entire thing was to make it to where anyone can come to cloud services and have that security. It doesn't matter if it's, we built it out for Department of Defense first because that's what I'm most familiar with, and that has most, honestly, the tightest controls possible, right? So we can remove some things that come away from that from the other industry. Our focus is to provide it for everyone, all critical infrastructure. And so, with that being said, you're going to see some things in here like Department of Defense, information system stuff. It's because we're running our, they call them STIGs, it's Security Technical Implementation Guides. It's requirements that the Department of Defense puts on applications. And so we've been building out our application with those security requirements in mind as well as the White House guidance that says that you should be using memory-safe applications. So this is all written in Rust. Some people know that, what that is, some people don't. It's a safe language. It's something that's really complicated. Not a lot of people know right now, but a lot of people do. And so, all written in Rust, and what you're going to see is that we're going to make it to where you don't need an entire team to build out the infrastructure. It's not going to take 12 months to 18 months. We're collapsing that down. We're doing months to minutes. That's exactly what we're doing. We're deploying from months to minutes. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need people, that you don't need smart people, or these high security advisors and everything else. This is a tool. This is to bring companies to compliance as fast as possible, and then maintaining that compliance is a completely different beast that we're trying to provide this tool for as well. So go ahead and get started. I'm going to click over here. I've already done some setup. The setup is that I've logged in with the break glass user and connected the single sign-on. So So I can walk you guys through all that, but I don't think you really would care. So as a break class user, we have different users with different permissions. And so like a basic user doesn't really have the settings. They can't mess with the settings. You have to be an administrator for that. I don't have any other users configured for this besides myself, so I'm a basic user for the demonstration. You guys will see that when I log in. But for break class user, they have all permissions, so you can see the settings. Under the settings, we have the single sign-on, and for the setup, we walk users through this. The single sign-on is not an easy process. It can be if deployed correctly, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's not going to be easy. It's not something for everyone. We offer this because it's more secure. It's one of those things that allows us to have two-factor authentications managed through a different tenant, a different company like Microsoft. And so we rely on some of Microsoft's infrastructure in order to secure how we log in and authenticate. A lot of the Department of Defense uses Microsoft as well. But this is a wizard that walks them through step by step. It gives them directions on how to do that. I don't have this information in front of me right here, so I'm not going to mess with that. I'm just going to close it out. But that is how you connect the OIDC for single sign-on. You can see that it indicates ready. There's different profiles that you can have. This allows us to select different accounts. So if you have multiple AWS accounts, then you can select them right here and you can operate within those accounts. Also, the LLM. So what we've done is gone through and fine-tuned trained our large language model. We made it to where it is tuned and trained specifically for our tool use and for the type of drawings and the type of documentation that's needed to be provided for the user and for the security compliance. So that was a lot. But we have our own LLM that's from a baseline. Then we've gone through and we're hosting it, and you can see it's on the machine right here, which is why it's got that LLM API. Then we provide API keys as well. So the API key, that's how users actually interact with our LLM. That's how we have licensing structures built up. So if they're not licensed to use the product, then they can't really use the product. And so that's just how it's baked in. To ensure compliance, that we're able to provide any type of support that's needed. I'm going to go ahead and sign out and use these in the sign. You guys probably think that's annoying, but there's a reason for it why we're using Microsoft, because you can have fatigue from doing too much two-factor authentication, right? You don't want that. So we do it through here. Sorry, this is different because of how it's asking me for additional information. I told Anthony before, I'm super nervous about this. I've been building it out for a year and a half in the back end, but I typed in the value and it passed right. I had to type in some other information that counts. So anyway, our dashboard, our main dashboard here. The dashboard is meant to provide a lot of information for the user, so they don't have to go into AWS. It's the important things. If anyone in here has used AWS, they know that AWS's infrastructure sucks. It's horrible to work with. It's so hard to find everything you need. It's like 20 clicks to get to anything. And our overall goal of this application is to make it easy. You don't have to be a cloud expert, like I said. So we just throw up the costs in there. We pull it directly from AWS. We have forecasting that we provide as well. And we back them off. Over here you have the snapshot. So this is the actual security and compliance of different standards. So it's showing the top two right here. We've got actually it's the high and the low. But we have the AWS Foundations benchmark, and then we also have the NIST 853 red flag. And we're at 88% compliant with the DoD standards. Now, a lot of this, we can get to 100%, right? But we don't want to. A lot of AWS services cost money. And so if you just turned everything on and made it 100%, then the end user is going to spend a whole bunch of money that they don't need to, right? And that's usually what happens when you get people that don't know about cloud services. So what we do is we enable the ones that we feel are important. We still allow the users to go back and re-implement those additional controls. So if you don't have certain controls ahead, you can launch them and it automatically does it for you. Down here we have more spending and billing, and we're going to be building out more dashboards for it as well. But I'm going to jump to something that's probably what everyone really wants to see, is when they first launched RapidFactory, they're able to build out that entire ecosystem at AWS right away. And it does it for them automatically. We're utilizing LLM, and we're not utilizing LLM to go in and create commands. That's not what we're doing. We've got patent pending on this for this technology, but what's actually happening is we've already gone through and built out blueprints in the background. We've got blueprints for every type of equipment that's out there. We've got blueprints for our cloud compute. We've got blueprints for our databases, for our web servers that are up there. We have different web servers like S3 buckets, things like that. And so, as well as, I'm going to say it, Kubernetes, right? EKS. And so we've got all of this, these blueprints already in place. We've baked in the security for each one of those devices, and what we allow the users to do is provide them information that doesn't affect security. What is your host name of the system? What type of EC2 instance do you need? Those aspects of it. We've baked in the rest. And so the users can interact with the system in a very streamlined way. The LLM helps them through that process. It's like I said, they're probably not going to know what an EC2 instance is. I'm sure a lot of you in here don't, right? And so I'm going to go through this process. I'm going to create, say, I need a second Dell server. That will just do that. Okay, and it's asking what account I want to implement this in. Sorry, I'm really nervous. If this breaks, this is the spot that's going to get. Let's do the host name, right? I've already got an SMTP server that's in the cloud that's up here, so I'm going to call this one SMTP01. Right? Now choose the instance size. So this is the part where some people don't know about instances in EC2. This is a cloud compute. It's like how much performance your computer has. So sometimes people don't know. Like say I don't know about a mail server. I don't know. This is a basic mail server. I really don't know what kind of configuration I need, but I can provide a spec sheet. So if I have a document like a requirements file, I can just drag and drop the requirements file into the text field, and it reads it in and knows what it needs. Or if I know, like, hey, I'm going to be running all these different applications on this server, I can tell it right here, and then it knows that the minimum requirements of all those puts it together, and then recommends the proper size of EC2 instance. So it recommends how much RAM you need, how much compute power, how much storage. It recommends all those things. And you still have the option to change them. So I'm going to tell it, I don't. What do you recommend? And this stuff here. But, yeah, it recommends a T3 micro. That is a bare minimum instance. It's very cheap. It's affordable. If I deploy it, it's actually free because it's that small machine. And so it recommends the most affordable machine that's available to meet my needs, which is what everyone wants, right, for the most part. But I still have the chance and I still have the capability to go back in here later on and tell it, hey, this T3 micro is not working out. I need more RAM or whatever the case may be, and it'll actually go through and change the instance for you. So it's asking you to reply yes to accept it. And it looks looks like it's bugged. I've ran into this one before. That's so horrible. I have a video I can share of this also working, I'll pull it up. But I'm actively developing on this, like constantly around the clock. And so right now it's getting into the yes feature. And so I'm sorry, we'll have to come back to that aspect of it. And I can probably fix it before the end of the night. And then if you guys want to see it run, we can run it again if you're still around. But what this does is it automatically builds out the entire system based off that. It gives you drawings. And Anthony, I'm going to give you the yeah.
Oh, sure.
What's that? Let's go off my phone's Wi-Fi. I really think it's important you guys see how this works. And this one's faster. We'll do this one. The other one I'm talking a lot about. So this one's saying T3 large. I'm specifying what it was. So it's going through it, building a T3 large, and I said it asked what schedule you want. So that's another thing. Is not everyone needs their servers running 24 hours a day. In the cloud, that's a default. It is on. It's sitting there, you have to manually turn it on and off. So what we've baked into the system is that it'll go through and ask you, hey, you have specific criteria for operating hours. And then you can specify it. Yeah, I only want to run 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday. And then it goes in and it makes that schedule for you. You can see here is where it's like summarizing it. This isn't very pretty right now, but we're fixing that. We're working on it. But it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you what the account is. This one, post name's an LLM. It's going through and it's selected Redline as the machine. That's Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's automatically providing the STIG, the heartbeat for that instance. It is actually applying, because it knows that it's an LLM, it knows that it needs to have a reverse proxy on it. So basically like a web server front end, in order that it's hardened and then points to the actual instance it's running. So it deploys that for you. It doesn't deploy the LLM right now, but it's something that we're looking to do in the future. But the reverse proxy is absolutely there. And then it goes through and it says cluster. You guys are probably familiar with the term cluster, but we have this set up also as auto scaling. So if you need something that's high performance and you need something with high reliability, then it's baked in, it's ready to go. You just tell it that you need it, and it'll select that auto scaling group for you and build out the auto scaling features as well. With the auto scaling, you can't have that schedule to turn it on and off, because it's always running. But you can downgrade the number of instances that are running. And so with the schedule, you can tell it whether or not you want it to have peak performance hours or downgrade its criteria so you're spending less money when it's not required. And then it tells you right here the classification is on fast machine, fraud, it's Linux, it has a web server role. You look right here, this role right here is important. So what's going on is it's identifying the roles to apply security groups. Security groups are like firewalls in AWS. And so it knows which ports to map, what's required to communicate between everything, already from my blueprints. I have the blueprints configured. All web servers need these functionalities. So it does that. And it requires it to be port 443, which is your HTTPS, right? That lock that you get on your browser. And it knows that to use that. As well as some other things. It has other things in the background. This is a Linux machine, so it's automatically rolling for the people that understand this into IBM as a client. We have an Active Directory server that is cross source trust with IBM for identity providing. So we have the capability to host Windows machines as well as Linux machines. And we allow the environment to have either RHEL or Ubuntu, as long as it's 2204 for DoD aspects, and then also the RHEL 9. So those are soon to be higher models. But anyway, So it has that cross-border trust, so they can actually communicate. You can log into your Windows machine as a user. You can just use the VPN, get in, and you'll be able to VPN right into our SSH or URDP, whatever you need, directly into that machine. And then you move over to the other machine, and all your information is over there as well, using the same thing. We also have single sign-on servers that are built out using RapidFactory. And so when we have a GitLab instance in there too, so GitLab's tied into that single sign-on, and your LLM server is tied into that single sign-on. And so it makes it so that the identity provider is always there. And it also makes it into the directory services with AWS. All right, I'm going to continue on here. This is something that my CISO really liked, is that we provide these drawings. And I get it, the text is a little hard to read, it's a basic drawing right now. So we're providing a drawing illustrating what the system is. It's something that they can see right away. And I zoom past that probably too fast. But it breaks out what your current account information looks like. They can visualize it. And this part takes a little bit, but I'm telling you to create. Like, yes, I approve, and that drawing helps you understand how it's deploying it, which is why we provide it. And so there, set up complete, starting blueprint validation and planning. And now it's thinking. So it's going through that planning process. It's linking the blueprints together with what's existing, planning out how it's going to deploy them, what the proper order is, and it's doing all of that. So now it's doing it. It's running through. Preparing organization quantification, preparing your IAM rules, any IAM rules that's associated with it. If the machine requires access to certain S3 buckets, which is like different web servers out in AWS, it'll give the permissions for those S3 buckets. It's creating the security system instance. It uses KMS. It meets all your criteria for, when I say KMS, it's key management systems. So it encrypts all your drives, your data at rest, your data in motion. It has all of that. And it encrypts it all using AWS services, maintains it, and then goes through, completes, and this is building live right now, the entire environment. So it's building all the way through. And you can see it's validating our identity center. So we offer single sign-on using VPNs, as well as for your permissions and roles. And so when you have those roles and you click your identity, you can come in as administrator, as an auditor, or billing specialist. And then with your VPN configuration, it's also been meant for single sign-on with Microsoft through Entra right now. And so you link up your Entra account, and then it's able to use the single sign-on that you saw earlier with RapidFactory. It does it for the VPN. And that way it identifies all users throughout all of the logs and everything else that it collects. And it knows exactly who you are, what network traffic you have. It builds it all out. By the way, the VPN configuration, my first project at DEF CON was to implement this for them because they went through 3 separate MSPs that weren't able to implement it. I don't know why they weren't able to implement it. But they went through 3 people, 3 separate MSPs. They wasted a bunch of money setting that up. And that's one of the issues that we see with AWS, and I'm telling you that because it's a long time to close. But one of the big issues we see is that people get contracted on and then things don't go as planned. And then they waste more money in that process. And granted, they have to switch MSPs to somebody else that's like, hey, we can do this, and then they go and they check, and they're like, oh, actually, we're having a hard time, maybe we can't. And then they go to a different company, right? And so that happens. This, you don't have to do that anymore. This provides that for you, the security. You know that this is going to happen. And then it's going through its elastic container registries, and it also does quite a few other things. That just takes a long time. But it's verifying access. It's verifying access against all those machines. Utilized Ansible scripts as well as PowerShell. And so when it's deploying all these things, it's like automating the entire setup for all those different machines. So it has to perform tests as it's doing it and doing it. So that's why this is taking a little bit longer. It's still for me. There you go. And then go to our artifact repositories as well. And then not only over EKS deployments. We don't have the EKS deployments, so that's not going to take a really long time. But it's still built out in that system. the IAM controls that are required for EKS. So if you implement EKS in the future, it's faster. So on your first setup, it does it. And then RDS instances, and then finalizing the request modification. So it's saying, hey, all this has been deployed, and it's going to verify it in a second here. There it is. And it's on. So that entire process took, I think it was 13 minutes, right, from start to finish on that entire process. And we can go check out. Sorry about that bug. Again, I will work through this. This is still the beginning stages and stuff for the front end. Going over to the status board. You can see we have quite a few things. It never actually got around to starting up S17P01 because it had that bug. But it already has that mail server in there. It's got the LLMs, it's got the Active Directory. We've got everything turned off right now to save money. It's after hours anyways. But one of the things that kind of sucks is like going into AWS to turn equipment on and off. Right? That's horrible actually. It's one of the things that everybody's doing. So we can go ahead and start the stopper right here from your desktop. And so it goes through and starts the instance for you. It makes it so that you can control everything right there on the spot. And it takes a couple seconds to start. That's cool. But while that's going on, take a look. This one actually has 3 issues with it. So this is CVEs. All the systems are being scanned, and they're looking for software vulnerabilities. That's what that CVE is. And so this bounces off the MVP database, verifies that the software is compliant, right? Or if there's bugs that exist, whether or not the patch has been installed, it verifies all of them. So right here we have 3 of these, and this is actually still active there. So they're there. They are critical. They're there. And the last time this ran was 5 days ago for the verification. But you can see it's all right here. You can follow that CVE to get back to the original. And we can stop the listens as well. For compliance, this is the big thing, right? So when you're performing your assessments, this is 853. This is like the heart of your compliance center. So there's a bunch of controls. There's like things that say like your permissions have to be configured a specific way, right? There's all these different requirements for the system. So we have 3 selected to be applied. There's more. We can apply more. NIST 171 for the DoD members and understand security, control the classified information, things like that. We can apply all those. And we're expanding that over to healthcare and over to fintech and everything else in the coming weeks and months. But you see, right, we've got 38 pass controls. So pull it up. Let's take a look at what it says. Here's the controls. Here's the mappings. So we can see exactly where it maps. That's a big deal. Having those mappings automatically approved, and it links it so that you can dig down by instance and see those mappings. Also, you can view the evidence. For failures, this is really what's important, right? So, and to talk a little bit more about the past findings, we have agents that are deployed, and that is a future product that we're still finalizing on the development of. It's called CyberDocs. It is something that you will see soon, but we're implementing that into RapidFactory. And so we'll first deploy to RapidFactory, and then eventually it comes to your endpoints. So it'll be on your laptops, all of your equipment, whatever is needed. But it collects evidence for you. It does the findings, it collects the evidence, and then stores it applicable to the instance, so your resource type, as well as the control mapping that's associated. And that becomes a really big deal later on when we're looking at the relation for that control mapping, which is kind of where we stand out as a GRC platform. That's governance, requirements, compliance. So in here we can see these are new vulnerabilities, well not vulnerabilities, but issues where they're not compliant with the standards. And so I can select them and choose a different workflow status. We've got whether it's in review, whether it's a false positive, accepted risk, compensating controls for infect, anything like that. This means a lot for CISOs. Probably doesn't mean a lot for all of you guys, but this means a lot for CISOs. And that's why I said earlier, this is a tool not to replace people, but to work with our security advisors. We're still going to need this teams. But this makes it to where we deploy it immediately. They are within minutes up and running in AWS with the client system, the entire environment. Then they can come in and check the scans. The scans take a while, I'll be honest. The scans take a while. But once the scans are complete, which is within 24 hours, typically they get complete, you can come back in here and you can modify what you think of each one. And you can do it per resource. So if there's multiple resources that are affected, you can go and select those resources and say, hey, this is why we implemented it this way. Choose your controls, and I'll just choose like false positive on this. But you can see in here, it allows you to bring it up, and if there's multiple resources, we'll show it in here. And we have different things like reason for change, right? This one's false positive, but there's other areas that we can specify. Not a lot of GRC platforms offer that detailed information. We'll have to enter a justification for why it's required for audit trail, right? So that way it's all compliant there. And then we have impact level we can assign it. We have remediation dates. But this isn't really a remediation date. This is what we have to review again. I'm saying this is false positive. Maybe it's false positive now, but our scanners are picking it up as something that shouldn't be present. And so if we're setting it as a false positive, or even if we're saying, hey, that's okay, we accept this risk. Well, then we have it set up to where if you're doing that, you have to renew that acceptance. We're not going to allow somebody to just set it and forget it. And so at a minimum, it defaults to 6 months, but at a minimum, the most you can set it out to is a year. And then it flags automatically again, and you have to go back in and say whether or not that is still something that you accept, or if it's still a false positive. So it makes you very compliant, or makes sure that you are aware of what's going on in your systems. And then we can also add a comment down here for security impact, why you justified it that way, which is really convenient for audits. And then add any additional evidence. You can click that, or you can drag the evidence in and save it. You can see, like this one is one that I did earlier. This one was moved over. I said this one's in review, right? It's just transferred over to that in review status or on hold. Meaning this is going to come back up in whenever periodic intervals we select it. So even if somebody selects it as, hey, this needs to go to review, and it just sits there, it'll flag back over if somebody does it, and then over your time. And for all that, we're able to create these audit packages. And this is that integration with Cybersecurity that I was talking about before. And so this is a huge deal. Because now, as a security engineer, when you go in and you have to provide those mappings that I was referring to earlier, what typically happens is the security guy has to go in and he looks at one of those controls, and then he has to go through for every single resource in the system, over and over. And you can do that 20, 30, 40, 500 times, depending on how big your industry is or your organization. And then you go to the next control. We're talking thousands of controls here, potentially, right? Depends on how many standards you select. So what this allows you to do is the people that are actually implementing the system and maintaining them, they don't care about mappings like that and going control by control. Auditors do. What the people that are maintaining the system care about is the resources, the actual instances, very deep, going deep into those resources and resolving those issues before moving on to the next one. And so that's why we have it set up this way. During our audits, it prepares a plan. It generates their security plan, their SSP, POEM, and you'll see here, if you're utilizing our POEM, then you can actually go ahead and export it directly to EMAS for the API system, as long as you have an EMAS key, so the API key. And then generates your security assessment report. And there's 10 of these artifacts that we built. Boundary diagrams, just like you saw earlier from the LLM feedback, that's a boundary diagram to where it specifies, hey, these are the different systems. What you didn't see on there, because it's a really hard to read, is it had subnets in there too. And so it specified what your subnets are, and then with this boundary diagram, it goes from within narrative, it goes even deeper. It says exactly what network ACLs or access control lists exist in those different subnets and where they can be. Then it also has the evidence packets that it offloads the logs, audit trails directly for the evidence as well for the auditors. Incident response ratings package, supply chain artifact bundle, and then the zero trust posture report. And you can see right here, it'll actually automate the auditor-ready package for you. So it generates all these resources and puts it together so that you can hand it directly to your auditor, and the auditor will go through that documentation and hopefully not have to come back to the security officer, but probably will just because they're going to ask questions. It's going to have all the evidence for each one of those controls, for each one of the instances right there packaged for them, ready to go. GRC doesn't have this. Nobody else has this. The reason why we're able to do this is because we're building out the systems. Something else that I haven't really talked about here yet is that when you're building out these systems, one of the biggest complaints that we get and that we've seen as system administrators is something called drift. You have your system as designed. Well, sometimes things change. People get into the environment, they stand up something that it's not tracked within your Terraform code or whatever your infrastructure as code is that maintains the system, and now you have deviations. And those deviations cause extreme headaches during audits. We have a tool using our Paradox that scans all of those instances and it collects, as well as the AWS, runs constantly in the background. It does AWS commands to pull what the actual state of AWS is. It compares it with a cryptological hash, and this is part of what we have our patent for, is it uses that cryptological hash with your Terraform or infrastructure as code that's running in the background. It maps them to each other for the instances, and it's able to detect drift based off the changes in posture for the actual AWS versus what we've deployed in RapidFactory. And then it produces a banner telling you, hey, this was an error. This is a drift, and it offers you remediation automated. So it doesn't automatically correct it. It allows the user to select that correction. It's a banner that comes across the top. So, but that's a lot, right? This is a whole lot for everyone. I know. I'm going to open the floor for questions, because I know this is like straight. So it's a big undertaking. I've been working a year and a half on this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, looks awesome.
Thank you.
This looks so cool. I don't have a reason for this, but I want to use it so bad.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. I was mainly just wondering about when I was seeing all this on the client side, I wasn't seeing any evidence of like when the scan happened or anything like that. And if there's a way to kind of see if this vulnerability exists in past scans, something like that. You guys show so much information.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to busy your pop-ups too much, but like, yeah, just when I was working as a SO, it mattered so much when a scan occurred, when the last time some device was scanned, stuff like that. And so just relevancy of like time and everything like that. I don't know what I should see or anything, or yeah, I was wondering if that's something you're concerned.
That's a great question. So you're asking about the scanning features, how periodic are they, and is it displayed for the users?
Yeah, how do you schedule that?
So scanning is not something that the users are allowed to schedule. We have it baked in at an interval, and it's every 24 hours. We can expand that to where it's more frequent, but just to cut down on costs, we perform the scans every 24 hours. And so, like I said, we can modify that within our settings in the future, but we're not focused on doing that right now because we feel that 24 hours is sufficient for most of our customers, or our future customers. And with that though, some of them does show the last scan, right? So like some of those devices have been shut down for a long time, right? And so like 5 days is one of the scans that I brought up earlier. It's like, hey, this one was actually scanned 5 days ago, or detected 5 days ago actually for that. So it wasn't scanned, it was detected. So that's a good point. But in the logs, it definitely shows it. So in the auditor package, it shows the last day that it was scanned, or the last performance scan. It shows you exactly when scans occurred, and then the results of the scans. Great question. Sure. We'll come right next to you. Go ahead. Yeah.
lost me after a few sessions. So this question, I don't know how to ask it, but so in our contract, if we say that it's going to provide telecommunication equipment or services, we check yes, and then we gotta go to a series of, and this is a long question, so what if we just cost to go and turn all everything off and you can energy save, turn off all the features and use the feature, to don't let those do all that saving question.
Right.
So if we just not, do we need the DoD criteria or whatever it is?
So that's a great question. And so his question here is, when they do their DoD contracts, sometimes there's requirements for communications and different aspects, and if you check yes, then there's a whole bunch of security that are required to go into that. And I'm unfortunately going to tell you I don't have the answer for you right now, because I don't know the exact criteria within your contract, so I don't feel comfortable just saying yes and be like, yeah, we can solve it all. But there's a strong chance that we will solve a lot of those issues, if not right now, then in the future. And so, because we are expanding this out, not just to Department of Defense, but also to incorporate telecommunications, right? To incorporate healthcare, to incorporate the electric company and the water company and everything. So that is our big overall goal for this. So while we may not be able to do it right now, or we may be able to, we have to see the contract, but that is something that our goal is to provide that. Yeah, you got a question?
Yeah. How do you track each change?
Okay. So all the changes are being tracked in separate logs within RapidFactory. And so the changes are because AWS doesn't allow you to store those changes, right? That's not something we're going to do. They will detect the changes in CloudTrail as well as CloudWatch, and that'll be separately done. But as far as like who changes it, that's a big deal. That also brings up something that I just talked about. Because I'm a standard user right now, but we have an administrator role or a supervisory role, to where if we toggle the supervisory role on and off, then my changes don't actually go into effect until the supervisor approves it. And so then the supervisor runs all those things. Where it stops and says yes, that's a supervisory check, right? It stops and tells you to implement, when we finally hit that create, that's another one, right? And so they go through that entire process of creating, and it doesn't actually create. And then it notifies the supervisor, and the supervisor has to come in and actually approve those, and then it launches once the supervisor does it. But our logs specifically state who's logged in. Like I use single sign-on for my log, you can see my name right there in the bottom corner. It tracks who I am, what my roles are within the application, and then it also tracks what I've done. So that's just constantly being done. Great question. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Great question. So that is something that is, her question is how often do we have to update our blueprints? And so that is a perfectly valid question. We have to use system updates within the application. That update process has not been baked in yet. So currently the way that we have to do it is issue a new application until we get those updates in feature, right? But what ends up happening is that the Terraform code that we have, we run Terraform code, we run AWS commands, we have different scripts that run in the background to pull and collect information that's not normally available from Terraform, especially for the systems that aren't created directly with Terraform and may have been created by somebody else and caused that drift. And so those systems we do have to update. Terraform gets updated with different release cycles, but for the time being, we go until we're towards end of life. We will not allow it to go outside of end of life, and we'll issue up to the point where we can support without having to break any compliance. So it really depends. But that's a great question. It is something that we're considering and something we're working actively to get to. I just brought on another developer that's their job is to go through and do update systems. Before I get to again, anybody else? Yeah.
I got a little bit of a follow-up question.
Okay.
What's the range of compliance frameworks that you support for like auditing or seeing? Is this optimal for use outside
great question. This question is basically we're performing this audit and all the details and everything else for DoD, but small businesses don't need to comply with the DoD standard, right? And so we intend on, over time, building out those other platforms. We started with those stringent controls in the beginning, and then we're working our way down so that everything is able to be deployed that way, the proper way. And then as we reach out to like fintech, or we reach out to healthcare, or we reach out to just small business that wants to be CIS compliant, that we end up following. Right now, we're focused, laser focused on Department of Defense and focusing on even sales, getting in there for startups that need to provide a service to the Department of Defense, but still has to build their own. Great question. Yeah.
Yes. Instead of running this locally, are you planning on this being a workshop app running on premise or in the cloud?
Okay. So I believe your question is, are we planning on putting this in cloud or just having it solely on a box that's in the customer's environment? Is that your question?
Yeah. I'm also curious about like the LLM and how that is somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a good question. So with the LLM, we have it set up to where we can push this container. If you're familiar with Docker or we use Botman, but if you're familiar with that, we hold containers. So when we issue the software and we install it, it has an automated part that goes and pulls that every single day and restarts it with the new container. So that we've got under control. We have whether or not we deploy in the cloud, right now we are offering that. That is a service that we are initially offering, but we do not project that a lot of customers don't want to use that. We project that a lot of customers don't want the software on their machines, and that way they can control it. And so that's what we're focusing. Just like this Mac Studio right here, this is more than enough capability for powering an LLM, powering everything you need. And so we would love to move to like a package like this that we can deliver, get FedRAMP approved, and ship out to customers. And that's where we're focusing our certifications and focusing our path. Thank you. Yes.
Are you collecting any behavioral data from RapidFactory?
Oh, sorry. I initially thought you were talking customer behavioral information like Google or something like that. No, we're not doing that, right? We don't focus on where you're clicking and get that information back, which is why I was kind of asking for information here. That would be great for us, but that unfortunately in the world of security, nobody wants that, so we're not going to provide it. But to answer your question on behavioral for the machines themselves, we utilize AWS's detective feature, and so that does that for us. We haven't built out the dashboard for detective, but we have a dashboard in plan that we're going to be putting in there after it's undergone design. And then it's a features that we're allowing to be enabled or disabled for detective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I was thinking of as a feature the agent behavior, but that's what we
Yeah, I agree. And so the only issue with the agent capturing the behavior is that now you have to train the agent specific to that. And we're trying to hyper-focus our agents for collecting the data and recruiting and stuff. So we would need a separate agent, and then then you're getting a lot of that network traffic going back and forth for LLMs. I think it's probably better to utilize AWS's services in that way. Great question. Yeah.
Speaking of that, you mentioned that you have a health check, like the monitor resources that I mentioned stacking curve. So I noticed something with stacking can consume a lot of resources. So
Yeah.
you have a health check or a dashboard that you can monitor the traffic, the health is scanning, all that is going on. So kind of health, check.
So I think what you're asking is like in AWS right now, you can go to the EC2 instance and select it, and there's like graphs that show you like what the CPU usage is, what the input output is, and everything. And so we don't currently have a dashboard built out for that. We can absolutely. I'm going to take that feedback and have it as something that we toggle as enabled or disabled, and more of a customized dashboard for your own page. But of course, maybe a different way to implement it, but we'll figure that out. I'm trying to keep it streamlined and simple, but that is absolutely a good tool to offer, is a dashboard to see it. Our current deployment is with Watch, and so we have restrictions set up for the Watch to where if they exceed a percentage of CPU usage or exceed a percentage of the disk or input output, it notifies the user in the application. And so that way when they log in, it gets a banner on the instance inside the status page. And that banner tells them that they need to consider upgrading that instance. Yeah, that's it. Yes?
So now I'm just wondering a little bit on the business side. What kind of SLAs do you guys offer? How much are you customer facing? Stuff like that?
So service level agreements. So that is something that we are figuring out. Right? Building out the business side, we are still in that process. Technology is probably more mature than the business is right now. We are seeking funding from VCs. We've raised $350,000 for a short runway on us right now, and we are in communications talking with the former deputy director of NSA, right? And like we're going back and forth with these guys and getting funding because people want this, they need this. This is definitely something that is not out there. We have a patent for it, and we're moving very fast. So yeah, we're gonna team with whatever organization that we settle with for our funding.
Cool. Can I just follow up?
Yeah.
About that is as far as like if you're talking about small businesses and what their needs are versus federal contracting. If you're on a federal contract, that's one thing. You can contract it out for however long. And you guys consider building a subscription model based on the idea of we know most people are going to want to use this just to build, and then you're not going to have as much of a need for it 3 to 6 months.
Right.
I mean, if it builds as fast as you guys present it, it might not even be 48 hours. So you guys ever considered a subscription? Maybe starting on a nice thing.
Yeah, we have the subscription model already mapped out. That's part of what we had to provide for our PCs. And so we've already settled on the pricing that we are recommending, but we have not done the market study to determine if those pricings are correct for the market. But we've separated out between startups, small businesses, enterprise. They all have different levels of values for licensing as well as agreements.
Very cool.
Thanks. Yes?
When you first select the type of instance, is it being, is it referencing a state or is it different states to flavor?
So it depends on the operating system. Right? So if we have the states already pre-populated through scripts, Ansible or PowerShell, depends on what the operating system is. And that's why we've limited our operating systems right now to like Windows Server 2022, Ubuntu 22.04, or RHEL 9. And that because we have all the hardening built in. So as soon as the instance is created in AWS, those roles are pulled down from the S3 bucket, the Ansible S3 bucket for the unit, and it installs those instances through that Terraform user data work that all the commands to install. And so then it runs all the way through those things and then performs a scan immediately after that to verify the compliance of the state, and then flags and generates a report on what states are not being used. In our states that we have exceptions and there's lists, and that's all on the back end side. So the users don't have interaction with this yet, right? And when I said before, like we're doing what we feel the best benefit to the users at the time, but the users are going to be able to say whether or not they have gaps for their organization, or whether or not they have YubiKeys or something like that. And so it will make it to where that is a state requirement, right? But it can be disabled or enabled based on that. Right now it is disabled because we don't feel that every organization is going to have those gaps. They can go in and provide that in Active Directory after the fact and make it a requirement. Something we do though is that we already pre-configure the Active Directory in the deployment to where it loads in those DoD certs and makes it to where all they have to do in order for a user to use their gap is to go in and toggle a switch within Active Directory and set the user's DoD ID number for the user ID.
Just follow up, because states typically have two sets, technical and administrative. So you've got a state that says, your technical control is like, then you have administrative things like, policy, right? Like you can't scan it. So are you able to, or is it usually able to say, yes, I'm complying with all these administrative states, you can bring it in.
That's a great question. For the administrative side, I mentioned it before, we have a separate product that's called Cybersecurity. And Cybersecurity is agentic services that go through, and I've actually demonstrated a little bit for Tom in the past that we wanted to launch Cybersecurity first, and then we got so much feedback from everyone that we're doing that RapidFactory is the way to go, the RapidFactory. So we shifted our focus completely from Cybersecurity. And I don't want to really bring it up too much today, but Cybersecurity is an agentic service that goes control by control against your policies, as well as the configurations, the technical implementation, and verifies it from that report that it gets from the STIG report that I sent over there to scan to verify your STIG's compliant. It takes that information in, it takes your policy information, it reads the policy, and generates, we actually had to implement something special for memory management, and those utilize, that's utilizing Rust as well for pulling out those agents. But, so it's a lot of information that's contained within that system. You can't just give, your security plan to an LLM and expect it to read in all that information, especially token usage. So we've broken it out and done specific memory management for it to where it can identify the files first, and it's a big technical process. I'm willing to talk to you afterwards about it, because I feel like I'm losing the room. But we have that product in line for next trial. And so that product, and we're first implementing it into RapidFactory. Eventually it's going to make its way to the endpoints as well. But that's what that does. It checks your policy as code. We have to deploy those things. So we update the user's code through that. Like I said, we just brought something up with this to implement those updates. But it brings it in and then runs the Great questions. Yeah. All right. That's time. That's 8 o'clock. So you got 30 minutes. That went really long. Feels really good to get the applause after a year and a half of this. I'm telling you. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. And I'll turn it over to you for final words.
Yeah, so we're going to be here for another